Hey y'all, I'm back with another Legacy video, and today I'm going to be playing Dimir Tempo. I'm going to be recapping my first league, playing the new hot tech in Legacy, Bilbo, Thief in the Night. If you haven't seen this card, it's from the Hobbit set, and it has a lot of text on it. 2/2, legendary creature, and it makes spells you cast from anywhere other than your hand cost one less, meaning in this deck, spells cast from your graveyard like Nethergoyf, or spells cast from exile like Brazen Borrower once it's on an adventure, that all costs one less mana. In addition, that other line of text, this is really where it gets its merit as a card. Whenever Bilbo attacks, you may cast an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell from your graveyard, and then you exile it if you cast it that way. So you basically can flash back any of your other spells from the deck that are non-creature spells. Flow State can cost 1 mana. That's a really cool interaction. It also might not be super clear. I was a little confused about this, but you can cast sorcery spells in the middle of combat. You can cast artifact spells. I guess it wouldn't be very good if it had those lines of text, but you couldn't cast it. But just to clarify, you definitely can. As far as the deck goes, what I tried to do here was plug Bilbo as comfortably as I could into what I had been playing before. So this list is basically where I last left the deck a week or two ago when I last played Dimir Tempo. But I cut 1 days for Bilbo, and especially post Fantasticar ban, I think it's safe to move Force of Negation back to the sideboard. And that made room for the other Bilbo. And so that did mean there were some sideboard cuts. So I cut, sadly, a Barrogoyf. I love Barrogoyf, but I had to make room somewhere for Bilbo, and Barrogoyf is a nice card advantage engine. The life gain is really good, and the body is really good, but the card advantage engine is often the most powerful part of that card, and Bilbo can do the same thing, but sooner. And so I thought that those might be competing for space. I do think Snuff Out is a very well positioned card, and I could see going to Snuff Out in the main deck. But otherwise, I think this list feels really clean. I thought this was a great league, and I would definitely recommend this first match. This first match was really killer. And without further ado, let's get into the games. All right, so I'm on the draw for match number 1, and I see a pretty nice hand here. Gosh, I sure wish this was on the play. That would be really sweet. But plenty of stuff to do. Got the Bilbo. And my opponent has a Misty Rainforest and says go. All right, well, a good opportunity here to Thoughtseize and hopefully clear the way for Bilbo. Let's see what's going on. All right, so this looks like an OmniTell deck of some variety. This is an interesting hand. They definitely are going to be able to dig really hard for whatever it is that they need. Show and Tell, for instance. If it's AlurenTell, that's other stuff they can dig for as well. Force of Will. I took the Omniscience here just because that leaves them with nothing as far as combo pieces, and they just have a ton of space to dig. I will very likely be able to Thoughtseize away one of these stock ups on the next turn. So my opponent fetches a Trop on end step and Brainstorms on end step. So it does look like it's AlurenTell. There are some straight OmniTell decks with like the One Ring that play green, but I think those have fallen out of favor for the Aluren builds. All right, so here's stock up. Kind of no surprises so far. But with my opponent stocking up here, this Thoughtseize actually looks quite nice. So Thoughtseize, and I drew another Thoughtseize. And so between the Brainstorm and the stock up, my opponent has found a combo. They can definitely cast it. So I think I just have to take Aluren and Thoughtseize again. And I had a big decision to make with this Thoughtseize because it's a little less clear which card to go for. And I ultimately decided to go for the stock up. That is counterintuitive to what I just did on turn 1, where I took the Omniscience to leave them with no combo pieces. And I could have done the same thing here, except for the fact that I think stock up is so likely to help them rebuild, either find Aluren immediately, or find another stock up or another cantrip plus like a show and tell. So I feel like just leaving them top decking with one combo piece in hand is better than leaving them with no combo piece, but otherwise pretty rolled up. So I decided to take the stock up and leave them to top deck something. And they top decked Polluted Delta, so that will be a surveil for them. Here, I can go double threat, but Bilbo will not be able to Thoughtseize because of their Veil of Summer. So that Veil of Summer is putting in a lot of work. I don't think there was any way I could take it. They did keep a card on top with Hedge Maze, so I could be dead here. And they found another stock up. It's pretty good. And they play out the Trop and pass. So again, they have Veil Protection. Fatal Push is okay. That's something for the Acer-Act, though they're certainly going to be able to hold up Veil. So I Brainstorm here. That finds some cantrips. Probably just put back the 2 cantrips. Leave the Fatal Push as some sort of interaction. But I'm probably going to have to crack this fetch and flow state looking for like Force of Will. So I do that. Here's flow state. There's Force of Will. So I could take Force of Will. I probably should have taken the Wasteland. I think I'd take the Thoughtseize though. I guess my thought is if I can find the other blue card, then maybe I can get them to burn the Veil. Then I get to Fatal Push the Acer-Rack, assuming I find off of this flow state, which I'll use the Bilbo attack trigger, I'll have to find both a fetch land and a blue card. So this is going to have to put in a lot of work. The Veil then would have to stop the Force of Will from being countered, but wouldn't stop the Acer-Rack from getting pushed because it comes in after all their permanents get hexproof. And then I have Thoughtseize. So kind of a Hail Mary line, but it is what it is. Of course, my opponent could just not have Aluren. So flow state did not connect very well, but I did find the fetch land. So Nethergoyf, Polluted Delta. Let's see. My opponent has show and tell, so I get to put in Polluted Delta. But my opponent has Atraxa. That's likely just the game. And you can see they get this trigger that has Aluren, that has mana, that has Force of Will. So I'm definitely toast here. Sideboarding versus AlurenTell. I like to take out 2 Fatal Push. Fatal Push is good against Acer-Rack, but as a 4 of, is definitely too much. I really don't like Brazen Borrower. Yes, it can return an Aluren to hand and Atraxa in a hand, but if those cards are back in hand and they can cast it again, that's really not that good. And then the basic island out as well. So I brought in 2 of the 3 consigned to memories, 2 force and negation, and that's really all you need. I don't really like Shoulder's Edict either. It's okay, but if it's making an Atraxa go away, that trigger is still just too good. So I don't love removal. You just really want a little bit. And this deck has too many outlets to win for Surgical to be very valuable. You can't reliably Surgical the win conditions out. All right, well, pretty much I just wanted a hand with Thoughtseize and ideally a counterspell, maybe something proactive to do, but I think on the play the single best card is Thoughtseize. So this is a definite keep. My opponent mulls to 6, and we're all good. So I do fetch the Underground Sea and Thoughtseize. And Thoughtseize is a pretty nice hand. It looks like they're gonna be kind of rolled up once the other combo piece shows up, whether that's Acer-Rack, whether that's Show and Tell. So I think my best plan in the early game, especially holding a Wasteland, is just to take the carpet. So I did take the carpet and left them with all those combo pieces. And my opponent starts with Polluted Delta, passes. I draw a fetch land, so that gives me a good opportunity to brainstorm. And then next turn, Flow State is good for 2 cards. So I brainstorm and I just see more lands. I can just put back the 2 extra lands that I drew, the sewers and the wasteland. Oh, but I kept the second wasteland. Yeah, I think that's fine as well, because if they're going to hedge maze here, that's going to get wasted. And then I want to wasteland, a tomb or whatever could come next. And I do like my hand pretty well. I can also ponder right now. So I think it's fine to put the brainstorm back. So ponder sees more flow states. Yeah, just wasteland flow state for as long as that play pattern will work. My opponent gets hedge maze, and they actually bin Misty Rainforest. So that makes me think that their draw step last turn was a land. And they do have Flooded Strand here, so that was probably already in hand when they made that decision. So here, I'll start with flow state. Flow state sees more action. I'll probably take the Nethergoyf and the Tamiyo, wasteland them, and pass. And my opponent again has hedge maze on end step, and they keep a card on top. So they play another Trop Out. I draw another wasteland, so I can go ahead and wasteland and just keep flow stating because I'm still looking for counter magic. And until my hand is full, I think flow state is the move. All right, there's Force of Negation, Thoughtseize. That's all really great. I might be able to wasteland them off green, and then I can Thoughtseize without worry. Okay, now that island comes out, so there's still 2 unknown cards. So I will again wasteland to get rid of that green mana. Play Tamiyo, Thoughtseize. I suppose I probably should have Thoughtseized first and then Tamiyo'd, or Thoughtseized first and then maybe Nethergoyfed if that's what I prefer. But here I see that wastelanding them off the green was definitely relevant. They had Veil. And still all these combo pieces, and I did decide to take this Veil of Summer. Because again, if I take a combo piece, I'm just guessing as to what I might need to take. They're still very far away from casting Aluren. So really, I just want to keep them from having protection, especially since I already have the Force of Negation. So I did take the Veil and left them with all their combo pieces still. And they do have that Ancient Tomb, so that'll be good for them. They play it. And I draw another Nethergoyf. So make a clue. And then here, I'll cast Flow State again. Okay, so I don't need another Tamiyo, so just Daze and Kaito looks pretty nice. And pass the turn. All right, my opponent has a green source, so now I am pretty thankful that I took the Veil. So now if I do draw another Thoughtseize, I'll be good. Now if they draw Show and Tell or Stock Up, they can't back it up. So I actually do feel pretty good about that choice. I drew Force of Will. That's excellent. This is probably just a good opportunity with 8 cards in my hand to unload these Goyfs. And the reason why I decided to go for the Goyfs over, let's say, a Murktide is Murktide's a blue card. And Murktide, at best, would give me 8 power, and these Goyfs are giving me 6 power as it is. So it's better to keep this as a blue card and just pound them with the Goyfs. All right, my opponent has another land, so they could cast the Aluren, but choose not to, so probably no Acererak in hand. I draw another Bowmaster, so I'm going to get to hit them for 6 and pass. Here, my opponent goes Show and Tell, so obviously I have to counter this, but no matter what, I know they're not going to resolve this with double counterspell in hand compared to 1 unknown card for my opponent. So I can go ahead and pitch that Murktide to force a negation this. My opponent did draw another Veil. Good for them. So I decided to go ahead and force a will pitch Kaito, but right now you can already see that I have this game here because I'm going to be able to swing for 8 next turn, plus do a damage, plus do another damage. So I should have this totally rolled up. I could also be fancy, and this bowmaster could ping this bowmaster to grow my nether quartz, but definitely not necessary to do that. So bowmaster ping, my opponent can see they're already at pretty low life. Draw another force of negation, that's nice. Bowmaster again, and my opponent can do math and see they are dead. On the draw, I did make one additional change. I took out one more Fatal Push and brought in one more Consign. I do also want to explain, so I took Basic Island out, and the reason why I take Basic Island out instead of Basic Swamp is because my opponent is a Carpet of Flowers deck, and I like to do that against carpet decks that don't have Wasteland or other sort of mana denial strategies. But any other situation where I would be tempted to trim a basic, I would trim the swamp over an island. All right, so I open up on a nice hand again. My opponent mulligans to 6. I can certainly keep this. And here we go. Land go from my opponent. I draw Consign to Memory. I know I was eager to get to work with this Tamiyo, but now that I've drawn Consign, knowing how good Defense Grid could be if they have that, I think it's worthwhile to do that. And I made a mistake here playing this land. If you'll recall, I was just talking about the need to fetch basic swamp. And the reason I'm playing this land out is so I can possibly hold up Consign. And so it definitely made the most sense to play Flooded Strand. That could come back to haunt me, so let's see. My opponent fetches, and they like the card. Ancient Tomb, stock up. It's always scary to counter stock up when your opponent could also just have a combo the next turn, but I definitely feel like you have to counter this. And this hand is pretty good. I think Kaito is probably the pitch because of how far away it is. And that resolves. It's also just good to counter spells while you don't have Veil of Summer to worry about. So when you're against the Veil of Summer deck, sometimes you just have to take what you get. So I go ahead and fetch Undercity Sewers, give up on the basic swamp plan, and I see another Underground Sea. Well, I do want to get rid of that. I draw Wasteland. That's nice. So which land should I Wasteland here? One of them is definitely getting Wastelanded immediately. I think it's almost always correct to just go for the Tomb. If an opponent has like Hedge Maze or like Trop or Hedge Maze, Ancient Tomb, or City of Traders, then maybe go for the blue or green, or if you've thought seized and you have information, maybe you know that this is correct, but in the blind, it's so worth it against the deck that's trying to cast a 3 or 4 mana spell to just go for the Tomb. So I do that and pass. My opponent has no land, and they pass. So probably either one would have been good enough there, but I'm glad to leave them with less overall mana. Here's another Kaito, so that Kaito pitch is looking pretty good. And I did decide to just go ahead and get to work with Tamiyo while my opponent stumbles on lands. I could also ponder here, but I think holding up Consign is just still correct. All right, my opponent finds the land, but still no play. All right, so now I've drawn another ponder, so I have many options. I can flip Tamiyo, still hold up Consign. I could ninjutsu and Kaito, but I don't like tapping out here. So I did not make that play. I decided to ponder because ponder could find wasteland and then I could just wasteland. Ponder could also find any number of things that I might want. So it's worth it to ponder first. Force of Will and Daze are certainly nice. So I'll actually take both of these cards by pondering again, and then play this land out to shuffle away the last card. So I'll be flipping Tamiyo and holding up Force and Consign through my opponent's next turn. And then there's another Consign to Memory coming, so that could be tempting as well. Plus Tamiyo, play Flooded Strand, and pass. And my opponent has hedge maze and they bin Aluren. I love seeing them bin that. That means they're probably still on a quest for mana. But Carpet of Flowers is pretty good. So I definitely have to force this. Probably just pitch the Kaito. I could maybe pitch the Consign knowing I'm drawing another Consign. But yeah, I did go for the Consign. My opponent has Veil, but I do have that Daze. So I can Daze here and probably pick up the Sewers. But I could also just pick up the Sea to make sure I have as much mana because I can still crack this Clue. So yeah, I do just pick up the Underground Sea. But my opponent Force of Will's pitching Atraxa. And so they're going to get this Veil and they're going to get this Carpet. At least the Daze took away 1 mana for them. So here they decline the Carpet. So on end step, I just go ahead and fetch to get rid of the Consign. Here I'm looking for something harder like a Force of Will. I can also pick up Force of Will. So I do, having drawn Fatal Push, I feel like I have to pick up this Force of Will. And then there's an interesting decision here about whether to play this land out or not. If I don't play the land out, it keeps them off 1 additional mana. If I do play the land out, if they have Aluren Acer Rack, I can crack the Clue and have Fatal Push. Ultimately, I think that's more important because they can already cast Aluren. Now they could cast it plus Veil, but I think I have to have Fatal Push up. So, Carpet trigger. My opponent has the Aluren. So do I counter Aluren? Do I just hold back to counter Acer Rack? Interesting decision. I think with the push in hand, it's safe to counter this or to let this be. I could also crack a Clue in response to this and make a judgment. That's probably the best overall play. So you'll see I did crack the Clue, and it's a Consign. With both push and Consign in hand, I think Aluren is safe to resolve. I can literally, if their hands are all Acer Racks, I can beat all of that. And they do have Acer Rack here, so I think it's best to first just Fatal Push this. So there's Fatal Push. That resolves, so they get to get a trigger. They scry 1, so they enter the Lost Mine of Fandelver. And they scry 1 to the top. All right. Force of Will might be necessary next turn. All right, I draw another Consign, so just plus Tamiyo and pass. Carpet trigger, 3 blue, stock up. I cannot allow stock up. So it's just a matter of what to pitch here. I have double Consign, but I honestly might need these Consigns, and there's no telling when this Kaito is going to come down. So it's sad. I love Kaito, but he's got to go. So now I draw a Murktide. So I can let go of the Tamiyo and guarantee that I have Force of Will. The way that I lose, though, next turn is Acer Rack or possibly an Atraxa, and Consign does have that covered. So I think I can Murktide and then plus Tamiyo and leave Tamiyo around so that I can still keep up with my opponent's value that they accrue, or with just the sheer danger of Aluren in play. I think I can't afford to lose Tamiyo. So here I make Murktide and I leave Force of Will in the yard. Murktide's an 8/8 plus Tamiyo and pass. My opponent makes blue and they have a show and tell, so okay, whatever it is, you get it. And it's Atraxa, so they have 1 card left. It's going to be kind of hard for that 1 card to counter Consign to Memory. So I cast it, that works out, and my opponent passes the turn. I draw a Tamiyo. So I think my best bet here with a Consign in hand that can stop me from losing is to just do what I'm doing here, plus the Tamiyo. Murktide will trade with Atraxa if they attack with it. I also play out this Tamiyo, and I'll get to a Tamiyo ultimate. Here, my opponent has another Carpet of Flowers. They attack with Atraxa. I block. Carpet trigger, nothing. So it looks like I'm going to get to ultimate this. So I go to combat, make my clue, and -7. And I'll get a new Planeswalker here as well. So I draw half my library, and looks like I'm gonna definitely win from here. As you can see, I have all these forces, Thoughtseizes, and this Aluren in play means I'm gonna get to cast so many cards here for free. It's gonna be pretty sick, actually. So plus, and here I figure I just go ahead and Thoughtseize. My opponent has a tropical island that they've been sandbagging. So I wasteland my own land just to limit what they're able to do. I don't need any lands. I have Aluren. So here my opponent plays the Trop out and passes. So I just look at all these creatures in my hand and start firing them off. Bowmaster, they veil, I force. Nethergoyf, Nethergoyf, Bowmaster, Brainstorm finds another Nethergoyf, Nethergoyf. Now I get to attack for a ton, but I flow state for good measure. There's a Bilbo. I can cast that for free. Go to combat with all of this. My opponent goes to 3. It's possible I could have had something there. I could have Thoughtseize, but I think I would have needed a Kaito. Like I could have Thoughtseize my own Kaito if I had it. And then here my opponent doesn't find what they're looking for and scoops it up. So that was an awesome win where I got to use and abuse the Aluren. Of course, it was pretty trivial how I won at that point once I ultimated the Tamiyo. So GG's. All right, on the play for match 2. This hand kind of does nothing. It has Force of Will, it has a removal spell. It's not a mulligan. I would certainly keep this, but there's a chance that this just doesn't ever go anywhere. My opponent mulls to 6, and we're good. So Verdant Catacombs, I'll likely use that to surveil. My opponent goes Basic Island, Preordain. So with Bilbo being a now legal card, I could see Preordain being in fair decks, but my assumption is this is probably something unfair. 1 to the top, 1 to the bottom. And I chose not to fetch just in case my opponent was Wasteland deck, and I draw Flooded Strand, which is great. So now I am insulated against Wasteland. Here, my opponent has Ancient Tomb, Grim Monolith. So I think with double Wasteland in hand and very little action, my best course of action is simply to counter this and Wasteland them and hope that that makes them stumble very hard on mana. So I do Force, and that works. Underground Sea sees another land. I don't need that. Okay, there's a Nethergoyf. So here I Wasteland them, cast Nethergoyf, and they actually force the Nethergoyf. That makes me think they probably don't have other lands, or otherwise are quite far away from being able to win. Otherwise, a combo deck countering Nethergoyf feels very extreme. They do have another Ancient Tomb. I draw Bilbo. That's really nice. So I Wasteland, fetch, Bilbo. Sadly, Bilbo doesn't have anything to get just now, but I'm still glad to have it in play. And that is a question I have about Bilbo is how much do you really have to construct your deck around this card for it to be as strong as possible? And you'll notice that my list, I really just tried to slot it in and hope that it was powerful enough in its own right. But you're seeing here that it's not in a great situation. Here, my opponent is Phyrexian Metamorph, so this will be copying my Bilbo. So Fatal Push will actually have a target. That's pretty nice. I wasn't expecting it to. And then I draw Flow State. That's really nice. Sadly, the Flow State will not be able to get multiple cards, But I start with Fatal Push and just go ahead and Flow State. Here, I want to get Thoughtseize because I do want to Thoughtseize them. And then when I do that, this Flow State, which I'll cast again off Bilbo, will get me 2 cards. So attack for 2. This trigger has no spell to cast and pass. All right, I draw another Thoughtseize. That's pretty nice. So I start with the first Thoughtseize. Sees Transmute Artifact. So I'm going to get to Thoughtseize both of these because this Flow State is only going to cost me 1 mana. So Thoughtseize, Thoughtseize, attack with Bilbo, Flow State. Probably here, since they have a City of Traders in hand, I'm guessing this Daze won't really have anything it can counter, so just take the threats and pass the turn, leave my opponent with nothing. My opponent here just passes the turn. So I draw another Bilbo. So here I just want to play my Murktide, attack, Thoughtseize them. Thoughtseize sees a Show and Tell. So that's what I take. And my opponent is dead next turn. But they top deck the One Ring, as one does, it seems. So we play on. Okay, I draw Nethergoyf. That's okay. Now, the One Ring, I guess, got a little bit worse because Bilbo can still get that attack trigger. I sort of think of Bilbo as additional copies of Tamiyo in that regard. So, Nethergoyf, pass the turn. And I don't think you really want to Petty Theft One Ring. Here they draw 2 cards. They cast Transmute Artifact. Still floating 2, so they could get Coveted Jewel. They could just get another One Ring. But the One Ring wouldn't give them protection because they didn't cast it. I could also here just Petty Theft this, but they still have the 2 floating, so they would just get to recast it. So I think you just have to let this be, and possibly I'll be able to Petty Theft this if they have another similar kind of effect. But they didn't find what they were looking for despite drawing all those cards, so I win. So versus this blue PO Coveted Jewel deck, I take out Brazen Borrower, I take out the Fatal Pushes, the Bowmasters, and the Swamp. And then I bring in 3 Consigned to Memory, 2 Force of Negation, the Null Rod, and I also bring in the Surgical Extractions. Unlike AlurenTell, I do think this is a deck where it's worthwhile to possibly Surgical the One Ring, Surgical Coveted Jewel, because this deck is a bit more one-dimensional. And I open up on a hand that has the best card in the matchup and Force of Negation. I would love if 2 of these lands were action, but definitely going to keep. My opponent keeps as well. Starts off with a Preordain. And 0 to the top, 2 to the bottom. I could just Wasteland here with my opponent bottoming 2 cards, but with a deck that plays Ancient Tombs and could even play Urza Saga, I think it's worthwhile to just hold up Consign. So I play Flooded Strand, and if I don't have to Consign, I can Surveil. My opponent has an island and passes, so I end step Surveil. I see Bilbo. I think I binned the Bilbo, but I think I regretted that because I do want to play this Tamiyo out. And that would be a blue card, but I think just the fact that Bilbo itself actually being good was very far away, I decided to bin it. And I draw Surgical. So now I have to hold the Tamiyo to have both Consign and Force. And my opponent plays another Soporific Springs and passes. I draw another land, so I just play Underground Sea and pass. My opponent has another land, so they just pass. I draw another Wasteland, so I just go land, go. And my opponent has no play. I draw Flow State. So now I think it's okay to get the Tamiyo down. So I go Wasteland, play Tamiyo. My opponent forces pitching Transmute Artifact. That's fine. I'm not going to force back. My opponent has really strong things they can do, so I want to respect that. My opponent again passes. I draw another land. So I play a Wasteland and pass. And here on upkeep, I do decide to Wasteland since my opponent has missed a couple land drops. And my opponent has no play, passes with 7 cards. I draw another land, so flooding out pretty hard. So just pass. Here, my opponent has Odawara. Passes the turn. I draw Kaito. So that's something I can do soon. But for now, just pass. My opponent has another island. They cast the One Ring. I decided with the amount of mana I'm holding up, I can just force a negation this. If they force back, then I do have Consign to Memory still, and I can like triple replicate it. So force of negation, and that just works. The awkward thing about countering that with force of negation, though, is that I have this surgical in hand, and I did say that surgicaling the One Ring would be good. But Consign is just really nice, and if I'm gonna have this much mana get wasted, I can always save the Consign. I draw another Wasteland. So here, I thought it would be worthwhile to just Kaito. So I cast it, but my opponent forces. I'm surprised they didn't back up their One Ring. So that works. They don't let me have Kaito, and we play on. So here, my opponent nearly did something and then decides to do nothing. I draw another land. And now this was really bad because now I only have 1 fetchable card since I took out Basic Swamp. So I'm starting to have a lot of dead cards. So here, I decide to just go ahead and flow state. I get a Tamiyo out of it. I only get 1 card. Daze looks pretty rough. So take the Tamiyo, play the Tamiyo, pass the turn. And I do Wasteland them on upkeep. My opponent has Phyrexian Metamorph, so they're going to get a Tamiyo, but I get to attack first. I draw another Consign, so that's nice. That sort of counteracts some of the dead cards. So here I make my clue, and I crack the clue now. I get a Force of Will, so that's nice as well. So now I'm starting to draw some better cards. And I do go ahead and Wasteland them. Like now that they have this plan to crack clues, I want to limit their mana. And I'm guessing that they're not holding a bunch of lands in hand. But they do get another island. Make a clue. That's fine. Pass the turn. I draw another Consign, so I have all 3 Consign to Memories in hand. And I attack. Crack a clue. They also crack a clue in response. Makes sense. I get Brainstorm. That's awesome. So here, a subtle thing. I might still want to get Kaito into play if I Brainstorm into Kaito. So I want to actually go to blocks and then cast Brainstorm. And then even with the Tamiyo flip trigger on the stack, you can ninjutsu in Kaito right here because I can get rid of this fetch land. And I see a lot of action. I see Null Rod, which is exquisite. So I probably can ditch the surgical at this point. And then, of course, the land. So here I'm happy to just flip Tamiyo, not having found Kaito. And fetch basic, or rather Underground Sea. And slam Null Rod. My opponent forces, but I want this Null Rod because it's going to shut the Tamiyo off. It's going to shut off a lot of what they do. And I think this Daze could still see action. And I have so many consigns. I can probably just force pitch Consign to make sure Null Rod sticks. And it does. And here it's very important to remember this Flooded Strand is a dead card as of right now. Daze could put an island back in my hand, but if I Netherglyph, I'm not holding up Consign. So I decide to hold off the Netherglyph and pass. My opponent makes their clue, which cannot be activated. And then the One Ring. Well, the One Ring's not great, to be totally honest, because of the Null Rod, but the days will work out nicely because I can put a fetchable back in my hand and then I can -3 on Brainstorm. So I think it's worthwhile to do that. I take the Undercity Sewers back in my hand. I draw Polluted Delta. So now these two bad cards, I could -3 pick up Flow State, go for card advantage, but with dead cards in my hand, I think card quality is the bigger issue here. So I pick up the Brainstorm. I Brainstorm. I see Force and 2 more Brainstorms, so just put the lands back. Play Netherglyph, pass the turn. My opponent has Thunder Trap Trainer, so I go ahead and Undercity Sewers in response. That sees a Tamiyo. Don't really want another Tamiyo, especially with Null Rod in play. Here, I think it's a pretty safe Force of Will. I could also just consign the trigger, but this also blocks Netherglyph, and so in the interest of getting the game over, I just force this. The only way forcing that could be bad is if my opponent has the Sink into Stupor and targets the Null Rod. So my opponent makes another useless clue, passes the turn. I draw Ponder, so I plus Tamiyo, cast Ponder, Ponder sees another Netherglyph. That's probably good enough. It puts them to dead on board. So I draw that. I attack for 5, play out the other Netherglyph, and I hold up double Consign to make it to my next turn. And didn't even need him. My opponent scoops it up. GG's. On the play, match number 3. This is a pretty sweet hand. I know my opponent to be a show and tell gamer, so I definitely like this hand a lot. My opponent's also good on 7. So Underground Sea, Thoughtseize, and I see this hand. So I can't take them off Tamiyo. I can, for Thoughtseize a Tamiyo, force another Tamiyo, but forcing a Tamiyo against the OmniTell deck seems a little greedy. I can keep up with their Tamiyo via my Tamiyo, and with only 1 land in hand, there's a chance they don't even get to crack clues with the Tamiyo. This card here, if you're unfamiliar, this is a really good card with Omniscience in play. It is very high value. You can draw a ton of cards or do a lot of different things. The Orum's Chant is looking pretty dead, and Flusterstorm could be annoying, but they're very far away from being able to back up a combo with Flusterstorm. So weird as it is, I actually think Omniscience is the take here. And that is what I took. And so I'll let them have a Tamiyo and just hope that one of the Tamiyos is a dead card in hand because of the legend rule. And hopefully they won't be able to crack clues. The worst case scenario would be if they, within their first 2 draw steps, found Brainstorm and another land. So they do go Basic Island and Tamiyo. I draw a Wasteland, which doesn't look too hot, but I can play my own Tamiyo. And I bin this Bilbo. Could have also kept it with the thought that this Bilbo would be my pitch to Force of Will. But I just go ahead and play the Tamiyo out, pass the turn. My opponent found a land and a route to a basic if they play basic plains. They certainly have a basic island, I imagine, still in their deck. So they make the clue and pass. I draw another land. So here I play Netherglyph, then attack, then, and the reason why I did this exact sequencing is I was hoping my opponent might play around Bowmasters and fetch and crack this clue. But without making the land drop, I was hoping my opponent would not play around Wasteland. So that gamble doesn't end up paying off, but I can still crack this clue and hold up Force of Will through the next turn. My opponent gets a plains, draws a card, and I could have also just played the Delta out, but this can still surveil. I'm sorry, it can't surveil, but it's still a fetch land, and fetch lands are valuable. So I think playing the Wasteland out, despite giving them that information, was just worth it. And I go ahead and crack my clue here too, just in case they have some sort of instant speed Orum's Chant shenanigans that they pull off. So another Nethergoyf is nice. I will want to try to get them dead as soon as possible. My opponent plays a Tamiyo, or rather attacks with their Tamiyo, make a clue, and they play a Tundra and pass. So still not playing around Bowmaster. And right on cue, I draw a Bowmaster. That's pretty nice. So I go to combat, attack, and decide it's best to Wasteland them here rather than letting them untap with possibly 4 mana, and then Flusterstorm and Orum's Chant are available if they have the combo. They crack a clue. I pounce. And then I just play out the Delta and play another Nethergoyf. My opponent attacks. They crack the clue, get another Bowmaster ping, play a land, pass the turn. And they go to cleanup actually and discard that Tamiyo. So I know if they have the combo, they're kind of rolled up here. But I draw Thoughtseize. I can Thoughtseize around Flusterstorm, but here's the deal. Thoughtseize, if I get an instant in my yard, these Nethergoyfs are 3/4s, but I don't have instant. So if I can get this Force of Will in the yard, then my opponent is simply dead on board. So I could honestly just Thoughtseize myself and take the Force of Will. I could Thoughtseize them and probably they fluster, and then I just Force of Will, actually, one of the copies of Fluster. I could Thoughtseize them and then hold priority and force the Thoughtseize. So there's a lot of ways to do this. It's possible my opponent could have like a Swords or something like that if they're a white deck. My opponent has a bit of the Brewer's advantage here. So I think the best course of action is just to play it safe and Thoughtseize them, figuring they're going to Flusterstorm. So I Thoughtseize them. They actually Force of Will, pitching Show and Tell, which is very interesting. So I just force back. And my opponent scoops. I don't know if they realize they can't beat the Thoughtseize. I don't know if they realize now they're just dead on board, but I will be swinging for lethal here. Versus this blue and white Show and Tell deck that has Tamiyo, it's actually kind of nice because I get to keep some fatal pushes in and upgrade to a Snuff Out. So I get rid of 2 Fatal Push and the basic Swamp, and I bring in 2 Force of Negation and Snuff Out. I haven't seen something yet to consign, so those can stay here. All right, my opponent's good on 7. I also see a very nice hand, so I'm also good on 7. My opponent has Island and Tamiyo. All right, well, it's going to be a Tamiyo mirror here. I draw Brainstorm, that's great. So fetch Underground Sea, Tamiyo, and here we go. My opponent goes to combat. I don't bother blocking. My opponent has a plains, and they Prismatic Ending my Tamiyo. Well, with another Tamiyo coming down, I think that's totally fine. So I play a land, I play Tamiyo, and rather than brainstorming now, I'm going to hold up Brainstorm against a possible Swords or Ending. My opponent end step Brainstorms, and I let them have this. So they're going to get to flip their Tamiyo. They plus the Tamiyo, and they have another Prismatic Ending, So here I do brainstorm in response. My opponent flusters, so they really don't want me to have this Tameo. I could still force the prismatic ending, but that leaves me with too little, so I let it go. And then I draw Flow State. I think the best course of action here is to Bowmaster with a plan of getting in Kaito. So I just do it now. My opponent has a clue, so I want to do this now before they can crack the clue. And now it'll be really tough for them to ultimate the Tameo. They could minus right away, lose the Tameo, and get Prismatic Ending if they really want. But they plus, and they pass. So here I can Surveil, Underground Sea to the bin. It could be nice to have the additional mana, but I think Wasteland looks pretty low value. All right, so here it's kind of tricky. I want to get Kaito in, but if I attack the Tameo, which I think is correct, I won't get to draw a card. But my hand is already pretty good with Force Blue card. So I go ahead and attack. I ninjutsu in Kaito, put the Tameo down to 2 loyalty. Surveil 2 sees Ponder and Thoughtseize. And while these are both quite good cards, I want to go ahead and get Flow State going. So I can bin the Ponder, draw the Thoughtseize, and then next turn Thoughtseize them. My opponent cracks a clue, so I ping Tameo down to 1. On my opponent's turn, they plus, play Ancient Tomb, play Stock Up. Since my opponent has already made a land drop, I think it's safe to let Stock Up resolve, because whatever cards they get in hand, that Thoughtseize on the top of my library is going to be able to get rid of. So I let it happen, and I pass. So here I Thoughtseize pre-combat, and my opponent forces, and they pitch Omniscience. I could force back, but I think it's probably safe to hold this. It also could work to just force here. I did decide to just let it be. But critically, with my opponent forcing, they have now lost a life, which means I can attack the Tameo with Kaito, put it down to 1 loyalty, but still draw a card with the Kaito. So here I zero. These cards together are kind of nice. I can Flow State immediately, Wasteland them, and then have Daze live for next turn. So I do keep both. Hopefully Flow State sees a blue card in addition to the Wasteland. And it does. So I get Brainstorm and Wasteland, Wasteland them, and pass. My opponent has another Wasteland, another Ancient Tomb, I should say, and Show and Tell. So 1 card in hand is something they're going to put in off the Show and Tell. And so if their other card is like Flusterstorm, then you got me. Force of Will, and pitch the Brainstorm. And my opponent scoops it up right there. So that worked out really nicely. And wow, 3-0 versus these Show and Tell decks. All right, I'm on the draw. This hand is probably okay. If I struggle tremendously on mana, it'll be really rough, but it has a lot going for it. I wish it was a little bit faster. My opponent's also good on 7. They stick with a Lotus Petal for a Lorien revealed. They get a Tropical Island and Ponder. So this could be like an AlurenTell deck. It could be like a different Omnitel deck. But I think Lotus Petaling for a Lorien revealed and then getting a non-basic, pretty greedy, and I look forward to punishing that. I'm very certain this is their only land. And Ponder doesn't shuffle, so I bet they found another one. But I'm still going to Wasteland here. I draw a Bilbo, though, so that's pretty sweet. My opponent Lotus Petals again to ponder, okay. And they shuffle, and they have Ancient Tomb. My guess is Ancient Tomb is their only land, but now I don't have any real interaction. I can emergency brainstorm if necessary. And my opponent passes. So here I get to surveil. But actually, I go ahead and end step brainstorm. I think that's fine because then I can Bilbo next turn. And I do need to be a little aggressive in finding interaction. And hey, Force and Thoughtseize. So I think it's best to actually hold off on Bilbo. Just put the Underground Sea back on bottom and shuffle that away. So I do Thoughtseize. They Force of Will, pitching Force. I think it's safe to force back and pitch maybe the Kaito, since Flow State will draw me 2 cards when I cast it. Maybe just Bilbo. Probably the Kaito, though, is just very far away. But I pitch one of the Flow States, and it is AlurenTell. And here, probably just take Show and Tell. And then my opponent has 2 mismatched combo pieces and no colored mana. So take the Show and Tell, leave my opponent with basically nothing, and pass the turn. And I did decide that Underground Sea might be nice, so I kept the card rather than shuffling it away. And I play Bilbo and pass. So I do give them a window. If they found like Island Show and Tell in their 2 top decks, then I'm probably dead. They did find Hedge Maze here, and they kept a card on top. It's a little intimidating. So here I fetch Undercity Sewers. I don't need another land. But Bilbo is going to get to flashback the Thoughtseize. So that's pretty sweet. I could also Flow State first and then make the decision about what I want to flash back. Flow State sees a Daze, which is great, and then just take a Fatal Push. So it is probably worth it to go for the Thoughtseize here. But actually I went for the push, or the Flow State. And that's awesome because I can Wasteland them. So I can go Flow State plus Wasteland, Wasteland Ancient Tomb, and then pass. My opponent brainstorms, and here it's a little aggressive, but I just daze this. And that's it. My opponent scoops. So another match versus AlurenTell. I feel vaguely responsible for this spike in AlurenTell gaming. It's a great deck. I kind of hope that it stays a little bit under the radar in case that's something I'm interested in for EW. I think it's really powerful. But let's talk about the game that we're playing here. So, basic island out against the Carpet of Flowers deck. 2 Fatal Push out. And then it's 2 Consign, 2 Force Negation. Sounds pretty nice. It loses to a fast combo, but a lot of opportunity to dig for interaction. My opponent mulls to 6. I keep. They go basic island and pass. I quite like this island from Mirage. That's really nice. I go basic swamp, having drawn the Thoughtseize. It's tempting to go Underground Sea, but I do want to try to deny the mana with Carpet if that is necessary. And I see a hand that has Aluren, Atraxa, Omniscience, Acerrac, so just take the Aluren. Mana situation's a little dubious. My opponent draw Brainstorm and cast it. So some number of these cards could still be in there, or might not be in there. I top deck Force and Negation, which is excellent. Now I can safely, without worry, just play out Tamiyo. If I had not drawn a counterspell, I might have pondered instead. My opponent has another land. And they did draw a card there without shuffling, so there was a card they hid. And I draw another Force of Will, so top decking excellently here. And so I make the clue, and with Thoughtseize in the graveyard, I think it's time to flip Tamiyo. And a bunch of fetch lands, so just put back 2 of them. And I go ahead and crack this now and cast the Ponder. These are nice. I can keep these. I can Flow State next turn. So probably just push on bottom. draw the Brainstorm for turn as a pitch card to Force of Will. Should I just drew the flow state? I guess I figured I would force pitch the other blue cards in hand. Kaito's not really doing anything anytime soon. My opponent hedge mazes, and so they shuffle one card away from that Brainstorm, and they do leave a card on top here. So they go Carpet, and I'm not going to fight over the Carpet when my opponent's mana has clearly come together for them. So that Carpet is a little bit win more. I mean, it could be very important for them, but I have a lot of counter magic, and I'm guessing my opponent is weak on actual action. So here, with all of these counter spells in hand, I'm definitely fine to pick up the Thoughtseize and counter a Veil, but it is worth it to do what I'm doing here, which is flow state first. Wasteland, Nethergoyf, Brainstorm. Probably just take the Brainstorm and the Nethergoyf. And then I do pick up the Thoughtseize, and I gamble and Thoughtseize them. They fetch, Basic Forest, Veil of Summer. So Force of Will here. Probably the worst blue card is Brainstorm. Now that I have Nethergoyf, I could possibly use this Kaito. So I pitch the Brainstorm, and then I see, hey, they have the combo. So here I definitely just want to strip the combo. Could also argue just taking the Acer Rack when I have cards I can put in off of Aluren. The Acer Rack could be very valuable and still cast off the Carpet. So that actually might be the correct card to take. And that is what I ended up taking. The Omniscience is long gone. So it's just Aluren, Atraxa, mismatched combo pieces. And I'm feeling pretty safe. My opponent plays another Carpet of Flowers. So they do have a route to an Atraxa here. So I do have to Force of Negation now. But now, after this turn, with me untapping and having access to Fatal Push, I can definitely let Aluren resolved. I probably would have had to counter Aluren if they had cast it that turn. So Carpet makes green, and then they do not end up casting the Aluren. I draw a Tamiyo, so I play Nethergoyf and pass. That's a little risky because now I'm not holding up Fatal Push. My opponent has a Carpet trigger. They play Aluren, so I lose to top deck Acer Rack here. My opponent passes the turn, and then, oh my goodness, they upkeep Acer Rack me. They could have had it, but now I can Fatal Push. So I crack a clue, trigger Revolt, Fatal Push. My opponent scoops it up. I mean, there was plenty of game left to play here. Maybe they figure I'm just going to minus and pick up Force of Will right away. Maybe they did a bit of a shame concede. There's an argument to my opponent waiting, but they got punished for it for sure. So, GG's. All right. Last match, 4-0. Let's see how it goes. Pretty nice hand here. My opponent mulls. Mulls to 5. All right. And they start with Yavimaya Expedition map. So it's on a mull to 5, so I have a good chance here, but it's lands, and I'm probably going to have to work pretty hard here. But Tamiyo is one of the better cards versus lands. All right. Crack the Bloodstained Mire, play Tamiyo, pass the turn. Oh man, my opponent has Karakas. That's rough. So here I Ponder Seas, more good cards, including another land. So I'll play the land. I'll play Tamiyo out again. And the reason to keep playing Tamiyo out is it Rishadan ports them each turn. So they return the Tamiyo, play Boseiju, pass the turn. Okay, so here I get Tamiyo, I Brainstorm, my opponent Crop Rots in response, they get Urza Saga, and so the Brainstorm sees not the best stuff here, but I am going to get to shuffle away some stuff, so I can probably put back like one Nethergoyf and then the Tamiyo. But I put back the Tamiyo and the Bilbo. Makes sense with Karakas. And so I play another Nethergoyf and I pass. My opponent cracks the map on end step for a Thespian stage. So the Dark Depths combo is a bit concerning. If that's the route they're going, I do need to be careful. Mox Diamond, pitch Taiga, so one card left in hand. And here we go. I draw Wasteland, and then you'll have to behold a tragic circumstance that unfolds here. So I didn't assume my opponent would have a crop rotation in hand, because if they had crop rotation in hand, they should have fired it off already. They shouldn't have let me draw, and they shouldn't have let me untap. They should have just made their Merit Lage immediately. So what I was figuring here is this Wasteland is probably going to be actually countering or wastelanding the Urza Saga. And I was thinking that they might copy the Urza Saga with Thespian stage. But the reason why I have spoken about this is I decide here, rather than playing Wasteland out, I decide to flow state first. And maybe I was definitely going to play Wasteland in hindsight, so there was no reason to give them priority. I should have just played it out. So I flow state. My opponent crop rotations in response. So that was their last card. So that means they can get Dark Depths. So this is an emergency. I have to brainstorm. Brainstorm does not find Force of Will, so they're going to get their Merit Lage if they do this correctly. And they do. They make the Dark Depths immediately. So now there's really nothing I can do about it. If I was able to find like a land and a Tamiyo, I could chump for a turn. But sadly, I could not capitalize on my opponent's Molt of 5. So, good game. Versus lands, there's a lot of cards that are bad, like Daze, Thoughtseize, and Orge Bowmasters, and Fatal Push is pretty mediocre. So I brought in 3 Consign, 2 Force of Negation, 2 Barrowgoyf, Sheoldred's Edict, 2 Surgicals. That does quite improve the deck, but I'm definitely going to have to work hard to win this match, down a game. And I got a no colored mana hand, so I had to mull. This hand's better. I can just put back a Nethergoyf. And so I start off with Nethergoyf, pass the turn. My opponent has Exploration. I'm certainly not going to go basically hellbent to counter Exploration. And they do Wasteland me. That's fine. I draw Force of Will. I go to combat. Attack for 1. I could have surveilled here, but I don't think I want to blow my colored mana. If they Wasteland me and it's because I surveilled, it would not be worth it. So my opponent has Ancient Tomb, Thespian Stage, Crucible of Worlds. I can't let them have that. So Force of Negation. Now they have Expedition Map, so they're going to get to Dark Depths. So here I draw Sheoldred's Edict, which is pretty nice. I attack for 2. I go ahead and get Bilbo out. And here my opponent has Sylvan Library. Yikes. Yikes. And they crack the map. Karakas. Urza Saga. Karakas the Bilbo back. I feel like I have to Wasteland this Urza Saga. Attack them for 2. Pass the turn. My opponent keeps a card. They have Drop of Honey. Old school tech here, but that's going to kill my Nethergoyf. And then they're going to get to keep this in play forever because you see when there are no creatures on the battlefield, sacrifice this enchantment. So for as long as they have a Merit Lage, which it looks like they're going to get. So if I don't top deck the land, it's just GG immediately. My opponent makes the Merit Lage and I draw Fatal Push. So sadly, the dream dies here against a very tough matchup. So looking back at the deck, the big question for me about the new printing, Bilbo, Thief in the Night, is how much is this card going to compete with similar slots, like Tamiyo as a card advantage engine, like Kaito, like Orcish Bowmasters, and Flow State as a 2-drop? It definitely works very well with Flow State, So I don't think you want to be cutting flow states for Bilbos. You might even want to max out on flow state, but Bowmaster, I think, is going to feel especially good with Bilbo because um, if Bilbo makes blue decks more popular, Orcish Bowmasters becomes better. And then the other question is, how much do you have to build your deck around Bilbo? A card that I've never really been a huge fan of in Tempo is Mishra's Bauble, but that works really well with Bilbo because you can recur that forever. I mean, Bilbo plus Mishra's Bauble is basically like an Emery because you don't have to exile the Bauble. You get to do it every turn. So that's pretty cool. And I could see wanting even more instants and sorceries and specifically more proactive ones, cards that you can use no matter what your opponent has going on. Counter spells don't work super well with Bilbo because you have to cast it first. You can't cast a Force of Will or a Daze or a Stifle or something like that. So Bilbo definitely requires some specific synergies to work well. So the real question is how to optimize that. But it definitely feels like it has a place in the deck. I was really happy with this league, and I look forward to gaming with this card more in the future. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.